I'm Jonathan Mamaril, and here we have on the HR Engage podcast, Hayley Fielding. Hayley, how you going?
Hi, thanks for having me on here. This is very exciting. Thank you.
Well, I'm also excited, Hayley. I'm really excited as well because you're a fantastic. I think you're going to be a fantastic guest for the podcast on this HR Engaged podcast because you really have a fantastic background. Been doing a lot of great things. You're quite experienced in HR, and I'd love to just open up LinkedIn, rattle off all the stuff you've done, but there's no fun in that. Why don't I hand that over to you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, so at the moment, I'm Hayley Fielding. I'm head of people and culture and have been an executive for the last 3.5 years. I'm based in Brisbane, but I'm originally from Perth. So at one point, I just decided to pack up and take a camper van and travel around Australia. And that's how I ended up here. And so I didn't even know anything about HR, really. I had been working in companies that were sort of too small to have HR. And this was also, I've been here for 20 years now. But I ended up working in a place that had a really great HR manager, and I thought, and so I sort of shadowed her a lot and helped her a lot, and I thought, I finally figured out what I wanted to be when I grew up, so that was good. And then I've been in Brisbane for nearly 20 years now and been doing HR for about 14 years.
So let me get this straight. Your career, which has been a wonderful career so far, and I'm sure there's going to be way more to come in HR. There was no plan for it. Essentially, you had a really good HR manager that you shadowed for a little bit and said, hey, you know what? That's where I'm going to be when I grow up. That is this basically what you're telling me, Hayley?
Yes, that's exactly right. So it took me a very long time to decide what I wanted to do. And so I was a leader first, not in HR. So I was in retail, hospitality, and even in the healthcare sector, I was a leader. And then I finally figured out what I wanted to be. And so I actually got started into HR quite late and started off doing the leadership, doing the doing, and then realized, it's actually kind of fun to, create new ideas and help other people do the doing. So I really enjoyed that. So then I started studying while I was a practice manager at a physio. And then the sooner I finished studying, I got my first job. And so I was in HR. So I was, in 30-ish and so showing my age. But as a coordinator, so I started, the person I replaced was, early 20s or something, so I was coming in a bit more mature, lots of that background in leadership. So I sort of could take that knowledge with me, which I found it was really helpful.
So that I want to pull up on that because you came into HR a little bit later, but you had a bit of a background, as you say, the doing of the doing side of things. Can you just give us a little bit of a rundown on the types of stuff that you're working on? And you don't have to give us any specific details, but just the type of stuff you were doing that sort of led you to this HR career that's been, fantastic for you so far.
Yeah, so when I was just being a leader, not just a leader, but when I was doing that, actually coaching everybody from the front and all of that sort of the leadership side of the coaching and how can I actually make a difference to these people was really entertaining to me. And so when I started studying it, I realized how much was actually in HR and how much that encompassed every single part of the business. And I find that that's the most interesting part to me because I can roll out projects, sort of workforce planning, actually be able to make a difference and go, don't just replace that role when they leave. What do you use this as an opportunity now to go, what do I actually need? Do you need this like for like? Is there something else can you find an efficiency so you don't need that person, but you could get someone to be an advisor on something else so you can get more out of that sort of function? So I find that the actual being able to help right from the start and planning how to do that, I'm very much a planner, organised kind of person. So it's really interesting to me that I can roll out strategies and systems that can actually genuinely make a difference in the leaders' lives, make their life a bit easier. And so I've rolled out a recruitment platform and it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work and it still actually is a lot of work for the HR team and we run very lean. But when I see that there's such a benefit for the leaders, and they come to me and give me such great feedback, and there's such great feedback from our candidates from having rolled it out, that, that's enjoyable to me. That's what makes me like doing HR.
Is that because you can put yourself in their position? You've been there. You've had the trials and tribulations of managing people and coaching
Yeah.
people. Is that why you feel that affinity?
Yeah, and I think it's much easier for me to be able to get people's buy-in, given that I was doing the doing at one
Yeah.
point. So I know what it's like when someone says, you need to do these performance reviews, say, and you go, I don't have time for that. And then being on the other side of that going, no, you don't not have time for that because you need to address this now, and, that sort of thing. So, that's why performance management was a big part of my HR journey, because seeing how you can actually make a benefit to somebody. I've seen people who had low performance or behavioural issues, and when you see them turn around and come out good the other side, that's incredibly rewarding. So when you're the actual people manager, you then go, wow, I do need to listen to HR. So when we're rolling out a project to get that buy-in, I'm like, hey, I absolutely get how busy you are.
Yeah.
I've definitely been in your position, and as a people leader myself, I have to do it too. But what can I do to offer you support so we can get this completed?
Your journey into human resources has been one that it sounds like has started almost with a leadership position. You mentioned that hospitality retail, which is a lot of people. You have to deal with a lot of people. Maybe a transient workforce, all those types of issues that you normally have to deal with. Take me to when you start to get into human resource. You said you were shadowing someone, and that sort of led you down this path. Take me through your journey into human resources. How that obviously that's how it started, but how did that sort of continue for you?
Yeah, so weirdly, I was working at the Airlie Beach Hotel.
Okay.
My partner at the time and I had moved up there for work, and started working. I'd never worked in a hotel before, so that was all new. I'd actually never had a job where I could sit down before.
Wow.
Every job I'd ever done, I was on my feet. So that took a little bit to get used to, because I felt like naughty that I was, sitting down. And then when she started, this great HR manager, and she started onboarding people, and she showed me like the recruitment side of things, and I'd go, tell me how I can help you. And she'd be like, I actually need someone to make these folders for new people, and I need this and I need that. And I was like, hey, I like this. This is like when I was leading, and I was leading big teams of people at some points in different sectors. And it was just great to go, wow, there's all this stuff that you can do in the back end to support people for consistency. And that's why it's very important for me, that onboarding and offboarding and ongoing performance management, to go, you are important along every part of the life cycle. And I think that's really important. And she definitely displayed that, because it was such a sort of small team. She was just a standalone. So she would literally write the contract and, all the way through to, helping leaders with performance management. Like, she was doing it all.
Yeah.
Which I just was like, wow, that requires such organisation. And I was like, oh, I'm good at organising, and I like to see everything fall into place. And I just really liked how it touched every part of the business. And I think that's definitely one of my favourite parts about HR. It's just, because there's people everywhere, you do inevitably touch every single, part of different teams, etc.
I think quite a few of our past guests on the podcast have said that HR permeates throughout a whole organisation, is not as departmentalised as maybe some other areas. Does that sort of feed into why you're passionate or you enjoy human resources?
Yeah, and I think as I've gotten more senior and being able to sit in on, executive meetings and things, learning more about the business is definitely something that, and all assets of the business, is something that's really important. And without knowing that, especially when you're creating tools to improve the experience, I just think that if you don't know a lot about the organisation, you need to get into that and learn more about it, so then you can figure out how it is exactly that you can help. Because if I don't know sort of how something works or what sort of service is provided correctly, I won't be able to support in the right way.
Yeah. Uh, that is discussed a lot. It's one of the common points that is discussed quite a lot throughout all the podcasts. I think pretty much all of them is that getting a real understanding of the organization working with, the commercialities, I mean, props, probably the risks as well, but really how it actually works. Why is it in business? You talk about human resources being that support mechanism for doing so. Um, how do you, in your view, how do you link that with the HR side, which and the various areas to that? There's this recruitment, there's the firefighting, there's the pay, there's all types of areas to it. And then you've got, I suppose, the revenue generation or production or whatever the service or product is. How do you marry those two, considering there's so much in between, so many people and interests in between?
Yeah, I think it's really important to explain the return on investment for certain things. And if you have some people that might go, look, we just don't have the money for that, being able to quantify either a savings or you realise that, the engagement score will go up. We could potentially have, less people leaving and that's a cost to the organisation. So especially, knowing who your audience is and going in, with those strong relationships to go, I want to explain to you why this is really important and being able to marry that together and go, look, yeah, we don't make money, but I can save you money. So, if you follow these steps correctly for performance management, it will likely not end up in Fair Work and I can save you money.
Yep.
So, any new tool or anything like that, you can go, hey, this could potentially have a return on investment that does X, Y, and Z. And even if it's an increased percentage to engagement scores, that looks good. That's a win as well. So it's not just a money quantifiable. It's also like the engagement level. And you notice that, less people are leaving and, there's just generally happier people, more internal recruitment because people want to stay for longer. So it's then really trying to figure out how the return on investment works and then adjusting your style or for your audience. So there might be some people who are just like, just give me the facts, send it through to me. I'll see if we can do it. But then you have other people that you need to sell a different story to and explain to them, why is this important? What else do you need from me for me to be able to get you across the line to say yes to this and see how important it is? So, so I think it's about adjusting your style and thinking about who your audience is because, sometimes people do think that HR isn't as important as something that's actually bringing in the money. But if you can prove that you're saving the company money, to me, that's very similar. It's just on how you quantify that and how you look into it.
So that persuasion and influence that you require, and having some data around return on investment, and you talk about saving money in particular, that's your sort of one of the focus points. So in your mind, when you talk about adjusting, that doesn't mean that you need to have a good grasp as a head of HR or even in HR to have a good grasp at, dealing with different personalities, because I suspect in your area, and I suspect many listeners are having the same issue. They've got people in, say, executive positions and especially in board positions and maybe even manager positions who they report to, where they're dealing with different personalities, different ways of thinking, and they have to constantly adjust and constantly have to figure out ways of influencing and figuring out ways to persuade. What is your, I suppose, pieces of advice or your thoughts or comments on people who are going through this right now, potentially those in particular who are dealing with, it's a bit of a problem. It's troublesome for them.
Yeah, and I think there's some prickly people as well, and it's the same as any sort of leadership. You'd have to adjust your style. If you're a leader, you have to adjust your style to each different person. Some people are just, just tell me how it is. And then some people, they'll get upset if you don't ask them everything about their weekend first before you launch into it. So I think it's very much building strong relationships, having a lot of trust is important for them to see that you have integrity and that the reason that you're asking for something is for the right reasons. Now, I don't get everything approved that I ask for, but I have to always know what to fight for and why I'm fighting for it. So I have to really understand what it is that I'm asking for from someone. And if you don't know the ins and outs of all of it and they want to ask you questions, you want to make sure that you are completely knowledgeable on all of that So there's any questions that they might have, you've got the answers, and you can prove that this is something that we need to do and why it's really important. And I also think it's very important not to, if someone is prickly or you sort of have a disagreement with someone, you're at work a lot. Not everyone always agrees with me, and vice versa. It's to not take it personally. It's just business, and you just lean into that. So, if someone's sort of giving you the cold shoulder, you just lean into it and go up to them and be super extra nice. And then so the moment then is, it de-escalates it. And It takes out all the power and the negativity that was with it, because it's a bit of a skill, but to be able to just go, okay, well, that one didn't get through. That's okay. But, they're still great to work with, and let's just focus on that and move past it. And, I think some people probably struggle a little bit with those kind of courageous conversations if they feel like they weren't being heard. And so I think it's important to make sure that they understand, that's okay. It's just business. That's all right. I'll find the next thing, Well, tell me how else can I support you with this in a different way? Do you want me to have a look? And it's being agile enough to be able to not have an ego and go, okay, yeah, fair enough if that doesn't work for us. And that's why you need to know so much about the business, right? Because in HR, you might think you have the best idea to roll something amazing out and have this, new way of doing something. But if it actually doesn't suit the business, there's probably no point. You're not going to get any buy-in. You're not going to get the return that you think that you might. So it can't just be cookie cutter.
Yep.
Every single thing that you've done in a different organisation, you go into a new one, it might necessarily not be what's right for the business that you're in right now. So, there's a lot of transferable HR skills across different sectors. I've been in, retail, automotive, healthcare, disability services. A lot of that is very transferable into another sector. So what makes it so different is finding out about the business and then how do I help them, instead of just thinking that I know all of the answers, because a lot of it just comes from the business. Making sure they've got a good strategy. So when you're creating your strategy, it directly links.
You talk about you're from a HR leadership position right now, so you have a very senior level of experience. You are in a senior position, and I think you talk about that adjustment and persuasion. I think that's a really some great tips there. There's a lot of people like yourself that are listening to this podcast, but there's also a lot of people who are probably maybe starting their journey or in the junior levels of the journey, but also people who have moved from, what you did, a very senior or pretty senior leadership position, and then moved into HR. And it's not that they're starting from scratch, but it's pretty close, right? They're pretty close.
It kind of was.
Well, can I get you to time travel back a little bit to the early career you or in the HR side? What advice would you have for early career Hayley? What advice would you have for her?
Yeah, I would definitely say it's to be patient.
Okay.
I can sometimes be a bit of an overachiever, and I do get a little bit impatient. Anyone who knows me will probably tell you that. But it's to really, whatever level that you are at, stop just thinking about that the sooner you get to the next level, then that's got to be everything for you, So, when you're a coordinator, oh, if only I was an advisor. And then when you're an advisor, oh, if I was a business partner, So because once you get there, you haven't really enjoyed the journey of learning where you were. So, to be more reflective instead of going, these are all the things I can't achieve because I'm not, in a more senior role. It's, wow, look at all the stuff that I actually have achieved. And then it's flipping that from being, don't focus on what you can't do, but then reflect on back and go, wow, I do a lot. I have done a lot, without me, and each one, even when I started as a coordinator, I'm writing employment contracts, wow, this person actually can't start without me. Well, they shouldn't.
It has been known to happen before, right?
So very important. So each role, I would say, don't be impatient. Do what you do in your level, the best that you can do it. And don't just keep thinking about the next step. And also, comparing yourself to others. Because I started older, I would see people younger than me or the same age as me in senior roles. and I started off as a coordinator, and I was like, wow, I feel like I'm kind of behind the eight ball. But I think the leadership stuff that I brought with me from when I wasn't in HR has actually helped me, especially with my one-on-one conversations with leaders, because I have all of the empathy in the world for them. I understand what it's like to be super busy or to do a task that you're not really familiar with, like with all the people stuff. So, you've got leaders that may have never done performance management before. They might be team leaders or such. And to be able to offer them support is really important to me, because they might be a bit stressed about that. And I feel like that's that connection when you're one-on-one coaching with someone and actually seeing them improve. That's gold for me. Like, that makes me feel really accomplished when you see them actually start doing what you've asked them to do, and they can see the results and you get feedback. That's what I like about HR.
It's and I know a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, it's really easy for you guys to say because you sort of at the you're already at the senior position. You're moving into that in that executive level, and I'm sure that's the case. I'm sure I can hear it already. Some people are listening saying that, but I think there is some resonance to what you're saying, which is you can keep on looking at other mountains that you want to climb, but think about the mountains you already have climbed. And what's happened to what you've achieved to do that. It's hard to just reflect, because I think what also you're trying to get to is that it can go very quickly too, right? Like that goes really quick does. Too. So as much as people get impatient, actually it goes a lot quicker than you think. And enjoy that journey. Yeah,
and I think a lot of people do get impatient because they're like, okay, I've done the study, now I want to be the boss. Yep. And you're like, hang on a minute, you've got to just start somewhere. And I have absolutely done the hard yards. I did them before HR, and then I did them in HR, and I have done all sorts of weird and wonderful back in the day, because there wasn't a lot of AI, there wasn't a lot of systems. So, you would just have a drive and a template, and off you went to do a lot of things. So, it's definitely evolved a lot. Yeah. But, some of the things like in the olden days, printing out exit surveys, and there's 5 pages long, and I used to have to put them in a letter, in an envelope with a self-stamp addressed envelope in there and post them off. I'd get about 2% completion rate. and it would take me hours to mail merge and everything. So I've done it all. Just, I would suggest is don't be impatient. Learn everything that you can be, and also put your hand up for anything extra. So I have found that if someone's like, hey, there's this project coming on and we're going to be doing something about, job architecture or remuneration, something that's not your strong suit, don't go, oh, well, I'm not very good at that. Well, that's how you get good at it. You learn more about it. You go and do a bit of a training thing on it, and then before you know it, you're like, oh, I actually don't mind this. There's so many different parts of HR that, trying a different specialty or trying a different task is a really good way to understand what it is that you're very good at and lean into that as well. Yes. So, the performance management, that's what I did my postgrad in. I did ER. And I had a wonderful leader who was just excellent. He was the ER manager. So I learned so much from him. And then I went, actually, this is what I want. I want to be a specialist in this, and usually it's some great leader who takes you on that journey. And then all of a sudden you go, yeah, this is really great. I've gone back to being a generalist because although I do like doing the performance management stuff and I think that I'm quite good at it, it can be a little bit draining just to be looking. Sometimes it's not a good holistic approach, whereas when you're a generalist, you can then go, I've noticed that there's lots of claims. I'm going to go back right to the start. What's the root cause? What can I do to influence this change so those things don't happen, going down the track? So, so being a generalist now, I think, is for me. But then, getting to work with lots of different specialists, or even just networking with lots of different specialists. So at the moment, the company that I'm in isn't all that big. So, it's also then going, okay, what's the next opportunity? And I get to work with other people who are fantastic at X, Y, and Z as well, So it's really exciting that there's different places for people to move to. So, I think if people see me as a senior kind of person, again, and I'm probably doing it again, you're being impatient and going, oh, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? But it's just the way that my brain kind of works.
Yes.
But, I always give myself a proper goal, always stay for a long time to learn everything that I can and try and impart some wisdom, and watching, my team member getting so much better in HR. It's just really exciting because she wasn't in HR when I first started, and I said, I really need you to be my helper. And
Yep.
she's just, and it's that proud moment, when you see them standing up for themselves or saying something important in a meeting, and I'm like, wow, that's really great. So yeah, to work with other specialists, learning as much as you can. But, I'm glad I was a specialist for a while so I could see what it is that I really do like, and then being able to impart that knowledge onto other people. And, I can sort of do a lot of that performance management stuff in my sleep, but I actually still get a lot of joy out of it.
I just want to pick up one of the parts that you talked about there, which is that networking side of things. And what did you mean by that when you meant networking? And maybe there are various ways to do that, but what did you mean by that, Hayley?
Yeah, so when you're in an organisation, especially a smallish sort of one like mine now, you don't get that leaning on with other people. You don't get that I just need to debrief with somebody to see if I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
And it can be quite isolating. And the sooner you find your people to network with, and whatever that looks like, I go to like a lot of breakfast seminars or, things in my own time. People can then make you feel like, you're not going crazy, and that everyone has the same kind of issues. And then you can say, hey, how did you deal with that? So then It's almost like having an extended workplace, in my opinion. So, networking is a bit difficult for me. I'm very introverted. And I know a lot of people go, networking, but actually it's a skill to be able to go and do that. So I just pushed myself into doing it more and more and more. And when I realized how important it was to have those connections and to learn from other people, I realized how important it was. So I just kept doing it. So even though it's a bit uncomfortable, I'm just go on, just do it. Go and talk to the strange people, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, they've got the same problems as me, and oh, actually, yeah, so and so, and before you know it, it just feels like a big support system instead of it being a scary, I should be doing this, and also you can learn a lot. Like, some of those networking things will have different people come and present, and you can learn how to do things, which is how I met you, and I think it's really important to continue doing stuff even if it makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So then you can have that network of people to rely on. I think LinkedIn's really great. I get people send me things via LinkedIn to say, hey, do you want to come to this? And then I can invite other leaders to it from my organisation so we can all learn together. I really think diversifying learning is very important to me. So, just death by LMS, nobody wants that, but there is a lot of compliance stuff that you do have to do with LMS. And our completion rate for LMS is 94%. So we definitely have that as a driver here, but you also learn a lot more when you get someone to come out onto site, or, you're coaching a leader about how to coach their team member.
Yeah.
So the diversification and explaining to people what learning is. So it's definitely, for me, I love going to those seminars and things and networking and learning from other people, because, if sometimes you can get stuck in the habit of just going to your office and just punching out work, and you're like, hang on a minute, am I actually growing? Because if I'm not learning something new, am I being progressive enough to be able to support these people properly? So, yeah.
That's a really interesting point, and like the whole, and that's why I asked that question of networking, because I think for some people it's it's not a problem, and I think for others it can be, as you said, uncomfortable. It can be very uncomfortable to do, and it's not the maybe natural habitat. And as you said, meet some strange people, but of course, for some you actually go, hey, actually we get along.
Absolutely. I've made friends, and it's good to then have other HR people to be able to rely on. And it's great. I've actually become actual friends with people, and a lot of the time it's the other people who networking doesn't come very naturally to them, so they're the person that they come in and they're like, okay, I've got my coffee now, I've got to figure out who I'm going to talk to.
Yeah.
And then I find those people and I go to them because I'm like, oh, you look like you're like me, but they're just person that you just haven't met yet. They're not scary. They're just like you. They're quite happy to have a chat. And there's been some great relationships that I've built through that.
Yes.
And so that would be a big recommendation. And that's at every level as well. I think as a coordinator, I still used to go to different events to try and get my brand out there, and to try and understand who am I in HR as an HR person. Who am I now? And what do I want my brand to be? And I think that's important.
That's an interesting point, Hayley, because that was going to be the next sort of question, which is talking about people who are really in your position, who are listening right now, or maybe people at in senior levels in human resources or people and culture or wherever they might be in that HR sphere. So you just made a really good point there about brand or building that brand. Can you give us some commentary about that and what you mean from a branding perspective? Because this is quite an interesting point, I think.
Yeah, look, I think it's important to think about how you want other people to perceive you. And I think, not everybody is the same person. Like, diversity is very important in organizations, and we preach that all the time. And I think it's really important for people to note that you don't have to be a certain way to be an HR professional. You can definitely, be uniquely yourself in a professional way. So you think, okay, well, what am I like? What's my style like? So for me, I'm quite relaxed, and I love a joke, and, and then I can also be very serious, so I'm like, okay, let me think about how I can make that work, so people will see, when I'm happy with whatever's going on, and I can take them into my world. So I don't know. I was told that like quite a long time ago, like, what is it that you want other people to see from you? And that can be down to how you dress, where you sit. Are you one of those people that comes in and says hello to everyone and is very loud, or are you somebody that's a bit more serious? Or, so I think it's really important for people to understand what you're like, and that HR people are just people. So there can't be that cookie cutter. You are an executive. This is what you're supposed to be like, and that's what it is. I'm like, no, because the whole idea is that we're supposed to be, diverse and belong and have inclusion. So you can do what you do well, but with your own style and your own flair, and and make that really clear to people what it is that you stand for. And it's the same thing, like if REM is really important to somebody, or they're more supportive in the OD space.
Yep.
Each time that you go to a different organisation, the HR person that you might get might be different to that, so they'll go, you really love to be in recruitment, and then so you need to do all this recruitment for me, and you're like, I don't have capacity to do your recruitment. That's okay, no thank you, so it's just everybody's a bit different. How do you then work with the business to make sure you're still supporting them fully?
Yep.
And then that people know what you're like, and it's good for them to be able to know if they want my buy-in for something, so a lot of the time something needs to be approved or what have you, and a business case needs to be done. So they'll come in and go, I know that Hayley likes to be spoken to first before an email comes out because she doesn't want to feel blindsided or whatever. So I'll soften this before I come in, and then they'll have a chat to me, and then they'll start to bring it in. Do you know what I mean? So they know what I like because I've learned how they are like as well with their own brand.
So branding is a really good piece of advice. Do you have any other piece of advice for people in the sort of senior roles, senior positions in HR?
Yeah, I think, I've probably touched on most of it already, like with the making sure that you are a strategic partner. So don't think that all of your ideas are the best ideas without first understanding what it is that company needs.
Yeah.
Because that could just be wasting everybody's time trying to go, oh, what we really need is this. And you're like, actually, that wouldn't help us at all, So it's really trying to do that understanding piece. And when you're doing strategy, to understand how it is that you can genuinely offer help with that, and making sure that you're available. I think it's just as simple as that. People know that they can my door's always open.
Mm-hmm.
They know if it's shut, there's probably something serious going on, so they kind of leave me alone. But my door's always open, and it's important that I like people to ask a lot of questions, as long as they're learning from it and not asking the same questions over and over again. Yeah. But that means that they've been thinking about it, trying to coach people, encourage people to come up with the answers. Be a problem solver. Go, hey, this is the problem, but this is my proposed solution. What do you think? Because if you're just coming in with an issue and you're just trying to make me think for you, don't do that. Make sure that you're trying to resolve the issue. Now, sometimes I'll go, it's really great that you actually thought of a solution. Now, these are the reasons why that won't work. And this is probably a better option, but I'm still just impressed when they've tried. And then when they learn from that, and then the next situation comes up and they go, last time I did this, so I'm thinking maybe that, but I will just check with Hayley just to see if we're on the same page with this one. And I love it when leaders come to me. If leaders don't come to me a lot, I'm wondering what it is, are they coaching their teams? Are they doing what they're meant to be doing? You need to be including me in some stuff. Now, some of it that they can just absolutely do for themselves and teach them to fish and all of that, because that's successful, right? When they can actually do anything that's people related, until it becomes formal. Sure, send me through something informal if you want me to have a little look-see, and we can edit that just to make the most out of the template or whatever. But when you get to the point where they go, just so you know, I had that informal chat, I've saved it onto the system, and you're like, yay, they did it. I just get all tingly when they're starting to learn and to grow, and that makes me feel accomplished. So yeah.
That's great. Well, going to challenges, because you've been in HR for quite some time. I know you started a bit later, but you've been in it quite some time. In your mind, what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing now in human resources, and how are you dealing with it, or how are you tackling it?
Yeah, I think given the size of my organisation, I guess my example for this is very much targeted at people, say 50 to 100 employees.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's the single point of failure roles. Because we run quite lean, when you're doing your workforce planning for these roles, we've had people in this organisation here for a very long time. And if they weren't to come back one day, things, you've got to make sure that there are tools in place to make sure that they can be replaced. And what I get genuinely concerned about is things not being written down properly, and work instructions and things like that. They just go, you just go ask that person. They'll know the answer. And you go, that's good. And it is very good that they know the answer, but we need to be able to make sure that we have all of this recorded just in case. Yep. So for me, that's been a very big focus. And I think anyone who's in a medium-sized business will probably agree, because you have to run so lean. So you don't have all these extra people that can just pull extra reports and enter data and everything. There's potentially people in larger organisations that can actually just do that for you. So then it's making sure that shadowing is happening, that things are being written down, that we make that a really big focus. Because what's hard about doing that is I just think a lot of the time people think there isn't time to cross-skill. And I just disagree with that wholeheartedly, because even if it's an hour a week, you can't tell me there's not an hour a week to learn something different, because I definitely think that there is. So making sure that you identify those single point of failure roles and those really critical roles and go, are we doing this efficiently? Does this information, is it coming across to the people that need it? What can we actually actively do as HR to support that process? So it's, looking at the position descriptions and not just refilling a role. Hey, can this be done differently or better? So you can actually have that holistic view of what it's going to look like moving forward. So I think that is the trickiest part for me at this point, just because, the time poorness, people go, I can't do any study. I'm too busy. I can't do any of that. And you go, no, the reason that you have this LMS assigned to you is because it might be a compliance thing, or you might actually learn something.
Yeah.
I think that's the purpose of why we're giving out so many LMSs and so much training. It's to go, hey, we want some consistency. We want you to not go, I was never shown that properly, or, especially like with performance management or just coaching their teams in general. I always want to make sure that leaders have the most amount of information as possible to make sure that they are making good decisions and being that first point of call for if something ever happens for their employee. They're not just running to HR.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's appropriate. Your leader should be the one that's there through thick and thin with you. And then if you need to escalate it, then to come and get that extra support. But, it's just making sure leaders at all levels are coaching their teams as well as them being coached as well. So, I'm one of those people that just doesn't ever want to stop learning. And I don't think there's ever a point where you go, no, I've learned too much. Like, I just don't think that's a thing. So, making sure that, everyone's completing their training, but also making sure that those single point of failure roles are addressed as a priority, because that stuff is very time consuming to go through every single position description and each task that they do and how you find out that information. If you don't have an OD person, which I don't, that all falls on myself and my team. Do you know what I mean? So it's making sure that it's so hard sometimes when you have something in a strategy and you really, really know that it's important and you want to focus on it, but when you get bogged down in the operational side of things, it's really finding that balance to be able to go, okay, even if it's just an hour this week that I spend on this project, at least it's an hour that, I hadn't spent on it.
Yeah.
So even if it's in small little bite-sized pieces, I think it's important just to keep moving forward. Or else, we've all seen it on a strategy and you come to review it, it's been a quarter or something and you have a look and you go, okay, yep, I've done exactly 0 things that I wanted to do because so many new things have been coming your way so you haven't had capacity. So, it's really making sure that you find that time to do that.
I suppose it comes back to that whole idea that you talked about, which is that persuasion and influence and trying to put a business case together, the ROI. That's sort of all linked again with what you were talking about before. And that's quite interesting at so many different levels that trying to convince. And you've got that, and maybe some other organizations have this, but that's a very specific one where that single point of failure, especially with people that have been there for a very long time, so very, mature employees. That's a task in itself. But you go back down to that whole persuasion, influence, ROI. Here's the business case why to do it, and then you've gone a bit further and said just chunk it down just to a little bit, just a little bit at a time. It's interesting how you're tackling that challenge.
Yeah, and making sure that the leaders are encouraging them to do that as well. So it's, you need to be writing down what you do. This has to be written down. It is a risk to the organisation that there is only one person here who knows how to do this. You have to write it down. So giving them that time, okay, it's first thing Monday morning. I've blocked out your calendar. You're working on your work instructions. Off you go. So, you really need to have the leaders leading that as well. There's only so much that we can do, but we don't know the ins and outs of every single job. Like we can't write work instructions for something that we don't know how to do. And we've got like a big technical part of our organisation. So I certainly don't claim to know how to do the amazing things that they do. But yeah, it's making sure that everyone's being accountable for their own, role and team. I think it's really important to take it back to that accountability.
So that buy-in, from leadership to, give some structure to this, give this structure, some organizational structure to some learning development, basically.
Yeah, and it's the why factor a lot of the time. What's in it for me? Because I rolled out the ADCAR model here for change management because I found like the why and the desire and the awareness at the start of ADCAR, that just gets overlooked and you go straight to knowledge. Here's a new thing we're doing. Here you go. And then people just give it to you and you go, hang on a minute. I don't want to do that. I already do it like this, So they're missing the first 2 steps of awareness and desire. What's in it for me? I need this buy-in or this change management is not going to work. So that's really explaining the why of this person has to write this down so then they can go on a holiday, and they don't have to stress if they get sick. They can, it's for wellness as well, for them to be able to go, oh, there's nothing worse is when you go on a holiday and everyone's like, and then you come back and everyone's like, oh, how was it? And you're like, I don't even remember, because I've come back and I have this pile of work to do, and because maybe I didn't delegate properly.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Or maybe I
Yeah.
haven't trained somebody else how to do my role properly in my absence. So some people just don't want to go on leave because they're like, it's just too much work to do when you get back. And that's a horrible place to be. And I feel like I don't want anyone to have to suffer that sort of stress that comes with that. Everyone should be allowed to take time off when they need it, and focus on getting the best out of them when they come back, because they're rested and they're like, actually, yeah, that felt really good. Oh, and someone else did my work for me. That other person has grown because they've learned something else.
Yep.
And now that person goes, now I can take leave and I see that I didn't have to do everything when I came back. This is amazing. Maybe I'll start planning my next trip somewhere,
Yep.
So that's the goal, and it is a lot of work, but you do need to get that buy-in.
I think that's a really key point, because I think there's a lot of people out there, and in HR included, who don't want to take those big periods of leave off. And I'm talking about 3-4 weeks off, like a big chunk of time off, and go to Europe or go around Australia or whatever they're going to do, or whatever they're into.
Both of that sounds amazing, but yes.
But I mean, that's a really interesting point, because you talk to a lot of people, especially in the HR space, especially with those who have very senior people, maybe more technical people working in the organization, or more technical industries. And that's sort of, well, I wouldn't say fear. Well, maybe it is a bit of fear of taking prolonged periods of time off. So they're only taking 1 week, or they're only taking 3 days or 4 days. I find that really interesting. And you come at it from a different angle of, well, actually that's what's in it for you, to provide those work, get some work instructions, so that there's an ability to delegate a little bit. It gives you an ability to actually go on holiday, proper holidays, not contacted for the odd emergency call or whatever it is, but other than that, off you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can be in a place where you're not contactable, or it's very hard to be contactable.
Yeah, I don't usually take big periods of leave, because I've worked in a lot of places where they really didn't want me to. And that's okay. It makes you feel very wanted and needed. However, I was like, no, I need to have a big chunk of time off. And I used that time to go to Christmas Island, and my phone wouldn't work there.
Yeah.
So I just didn't bring it.
There's no choice. It just
It's
doesn't
only
work.
on 2G, right? So, and it's only on
2G? I didn't even know there's a 2G.
I know, isn't that cool? Yeah, and so I didn't even bring my work phone, because I explained to my report and then to all the exec, I am not contactable. And wow, it felt, I mean, I would absolutely recommend it to anyone. If you can have someone that they can call in a case of emergency and they don't have to contact you, I report into a group structure. So, worst case scenario, they could always contact my leader in London. But, I've got my report up to a place where she can handle almost anything. And if it's something really weird and twisted or whatever, she can always contact him, or she can, worst case scenario, go, okay, she's back in 3 days, we'll just wait.
Yeah.
And I think she gets much happier when I get towards the end of that period. So there's a few things, because you don't really realize how much work somebody actually does unless you've done their role. So it's very hard for me to even know, one of our call center operators, what they do every single minute of the day, because I haven't done it. Whereas my report, she's been here for 18 years.
Yeah.
So she's done a lot of different jobs, and she can really get her head around a lot of the questions, because she's done it. She worked her way right up. So, but yeah, I would absolutely recommend having a holiday where you don't bring your work phone. And I know typically guys, because I don't like carrying 2 phones with them, and whereas we can pop stuff in our handbag, but some people just use the one phone. I don't think I'll ever do that. I don't think I've never been tempted to go, oh, well, I'll just put it all onto the one phone, because you can never truly disengage. And I think it's very important for mind reset to go, okay, well, I'll only check the work phone once a day. I work in 24/7. So it's, I always just do like a check in the morning on a weekend, just in case there's something quite urgent. But because everything's been planned out quite well now, there's hardly any of those times that we really need to do that. So it was just making sure that workforce planning and those work instructions, and if there is a major incident that comes up, who do we contact and how does that work? So that's that planning part. But now, going on a holiday without your work phone, honestly, it was just so relaxing. And I knew that if people needed to contact me, they could probably find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So I did say to Mamaril, I was like, look, if you get really stuck, but she's like, no way. I don't want to bother you. I want to do this. And that's great for her growth as well.
Yeah.
And one day, hopefully she can replace me, and then she coaches someone else and they replace her. And that's success for me. That sharing of information of everything that you've learned to try and encourage someone to do well, like that's really exciting for me, because I've had great leaders do that for me. The first leader I had in HR, he had put so much trust in me to be able to do what I did, and I'm still friends with him because he saw something in me.
Yeah.
I didn't have any HR background at all. And to give me a coordinator role, that he would have had other people probably had experience, or they've come straight out of school and they've done a degree and they're like, I'm ready to go. But he was like, oh, you've got all this customer service background. We're in retail. I like that. And we just clicked straight away. And he saw something in me, which is just awesome. And so if I can do that for someone else, that's success.
Well, I want to come back to that in a moment, but I do want to ask a very specific question, because I actually have no idea, and a lawyer should never do this, but I actually don't know what the answer to this question is. So
Okay.
What is the one thing about human resources that people might disagree with you about?
I'm not sure if a lot of HR people would disagree with me on this, but definitely just sort of people in general, I think. I don't really agree with the title people and culture.
Ooh.
I don't think culture is HR's responsibility. I think
that is a debate. That's a big debate topic, right? There's two sides on that, right? Two sides on that.
Yeah, and it also sort of almost makes it a bit fluffy, and there is not a lot of fluff in what I do.
Yeah.
And I know that everyone, again, has a different approach, but culture for me sits with the company, and the managing director or CEO really should go, what are my expectations of this place? And it should really sit with them. And then it's with, the exec team to role model that. And definitely HR can put tools in place to help with culture. And obviously we're measured on our engagement scores and things like that directly to us. And so we can put tools in place, or I can make sure that we're getting people to come out and, we do cultural sort of awareness days and those sorts of things. But if you don't have the actual, managing director or CEO, they're the ones that are in charge of the culture. This is what we'll put up with here. This is what our standards are, and this is how we are. And then everybody else, it obviously just filters down and it cascades down to their team. And then each executive is the leader of the culture for their department. And I think that that's really important. If people go, oh, the culture of that place is terrible, HR are awful. And you're like, well, hey, I've put in all of these tools into place, and I've brought all these people out, and I've done this and I've done that. But at the end of the day, if you don't have the executive leader buy-in for their team, their culture might be different to the operations culture from the finance team, etc. Whereas it all should be a united front and go, hey, you should be measured on this. How you talk back to somebody, if you have somebody who's a cleaner, you have somebody who answers the phone, at whatever level, you are responsible for the way that you will accept certain conversations, or, it's really up to people to go, oh, there's gossiping. I'm sorry, I don't want to have this conversation with you. I think it's unprofessional and I don't like that, and that's not for everyone to be able to turn around. Some people are kind of scared to have those courageous conversations, but if people did that, the gossiping would stop. The culture would change. The culture here is that everyone's super friendly to everybody and you can trust everybody. But yeah, I know that some people might agree with me and some people don't at all. But I definitely think, I like the title of people, to be a people, executive or a people leader. But yeah, the culture for me, it's way more than just one person's job.
Wow. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot of people that are listening to this on the train, in their car, at the gym, whatever they're doing, or they're even just watching on YouTube. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are nodding their head like, yeah, you're right, Hayley. I also believe there's also people on the other side who are also at the gym, who are also on the train, or also in the car, saying, I don't agree with that. I think it's a very, this is discussed quite a lot, isn't it? Like this whole idea
Yeah.
of culture and HR, and that is discussed a lot. I find that very interesting coming from your perspective, and I'm sure there might be a few comments on that. So yeah, let's hope let's see what the feedback is on that. I think, but thank you very much for sharing those thoughts. I want to change tack a little bit now because our tradition on the HR Engage podcast is we fire off the same rapid fire questions. So this is about you. And remember, this HR Engage podcast, the whole idea of why we put this together was really to be really about the HR community. It's about human resources and people who are in the human resources field. And it's great to get your thoughts and get your philosophy and the challenges you work in your journey. But let's find out a little bit about you as well, too, Hayley. So I've got a few questions. First thing that comes up in your mind, just say it out loud, okay?
Okay, got it.
All right, okay, here we go. So first question is, what is your favorite movie?
Yeah, that's tricky. I really love movies, so to choose one is difficult.
Oof.
But I would have to say 50 First Dates.
50 First Dates. Okay, out of all the movies you watch, 50
Yeah,
First Dates. Okay, that's the Drew Barrymore
yeah.
one, right?
And he is just so patient with her. Every day he has to explain who he is, and she doesn't remember him. And I just think that's so endearing and so sweet. And I certainly would never have the patience for that at all. And it's funny and it's sweet, and just gives you the feel good vibes.
I'll be very honest. When I asked you that question, I did not think an Adam Sandler movie was going to come out of your mouth.
Oh,
But
really?
there you go. I mean, there you go.
I love
I
to
learn
laugh.
new things every day.
No, I love to laugh.
What's your favorite holiday destination? Other than Christmas Island, tell us about Christmas Island. Are there any
Yeah.
other favorite holiday destinations?
I love going on holidays. I'm like the funnest person to go on holidays with because, even if things are going badly, I'm like, I don't care. I'm on holidays. I'm like,
See ya.
sort of, yeah, yeah. So, look, anything tropical islandy definitely has my vote. New Caledonia was amazing. Did that on a
Oh,
cruise, and so stopped at a few of the islands there. Thailand was amazing as well. So anything where you've got the snorkeling and the sun and the cocktails, that's definitely my vibe. But yeah, Christmas Island was good too.
lovely, lovely. And I think you have mentioned this a little bit, and that's why I want to come back to it. But apart from family and friends, who has inspired you the most?
Yeah, definitely that first leader that I had, and that he really trusted that I was going to be good and that I could do it. And he just saw that in me. And even when I see him now, we'll still catch up for dinner or something after 14 years later, and we still follow each other's paths, and what we're doing personally as well. It was just, he showed me that I could do it and not to worry about what some other people might think. I've definitely worked in some places where I don't know if it's me, or I might rub some people up the wrong way sometimes, because I can, I try to, be kind of funny, and I try to have fun, and, I don't know if everybody likes that. And also it's just other people's personalities. You can't be best friends with everybody.
That's right.
But I worked with a few people that didn't get my brand, I think, and we were just chalk and cheese. And
Yeah,
he was very good at being the intermediary between us, and getting them to understand my brand. And I was very experienced, just not in HR. I was experienced in other people leadership stuff, but that was all new to me. So to get them on board with me. And that was really special because I felt that I could trust him and he respected me. And, he would let me shadow him silently, back in the days before Teams was a thing. And you had to do conference calls, and that you could sort of sit quietly in a room and listen, and learn. And he would take me out with him to different offices and all of that, so I could learn directly from him. And, I think maybe that's where I get my diversification of training from as well, because you can read about HR and you can study it,
Mm.
but nothing beats actually doing it. and what you can learn by just diving into the deep end. He'll be like, okay, you're going to lead this meeting on this. And I'm like, oh, no, if I can do it. And he's like, yes, Ken, you can do it. And yeah, that actually inspired me to go, I can do this. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So yeah, I still keep in touch with him. He's very important.
So there's an absolute possibility that the person you're talking about could be listening to this podcast right now.
Maybe. Hi, Dave.
Well, shout out to Dave if you're listening, Dave. So you're getting quite a few kudos here, and thank you for doing all that back then to ensure that Hayley can be here right now.
It made a difference to my life. And I always think about that when coaching other people. I'm like, I want for you to be able to see that there's a different way or a better way we can do this that will help you.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on from Dave again, shout out Dave. What is the thing you do outside of work that you're passionate about or keeps you going?
Yeah, I really like to exercise. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important for me. I always take my dog for a walk every day, and just seeing how happy it makes her, it like starts the day on a good foot. But yeah, going to the gym and just exercising, I really like that release. It really helps pop a podcast in and have a bit of a run, and it really clears my head. So, you know, sometimes your brain can have too many tabs open, and I can very much multitask a lot, and there's always something that I'm thinking about and then the next thing. So it's really good for me, especially when you're doing like a boxing class or something like that.
Yep.
You cannot think of anything except for left, right, hook, squat. You know, because if the sooner you do, you will accidentally punch someone in the face, or, you know, you'll forget what you were doing. And, you know, so I think it's such a mindfulness thing for me as well. Like, you know, the same as like doing yoga classes, like I'll do any sort of class, and, you know, having a gym buddy is helpful, and, you know, just the classes where you have to book it in, or else you pay a fine. And if you don't go, and then I'm like, oh, no, I don't want to pay a fine. And it really motivates you to go. So that's really great.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
But yeah, I'd love to cook, and love going on holidays, love spending time with family and friends. So love a nice restaurant with some beautiful food, love trying out new restaurants, and, you know, having a glass of wine with a beautiful meal with people who are closest to me. Like, you know, that's a good weekend.
Oh, that's fantastic. Sounds really good. Tell us something about yourself that people don't know about you.
Yeah, well, the reason I went to Christmas Island is because I was actually born there. And yeah, when I went over there and I was telling people that I was born there, basically anyone who would stop and listen, I would tell them they actually don't have babies born there anymore.
Wow.
Gosh, this is going to show my age. 1982 was the last time they had any babies born there, and I'm before that. And
so don't do the maths at home. Just let it be. Let that number be, okay?
Older, wiser, all of that, you know.
Yes.
But I didn't actually realise they weren't having babies born there anymore. So when I would tell people that I was born there, it didn't matter if those people had lived there for 20, 30 years. They were like, wow, that's so cool. And I was like, yeah. And so I got to see my old hospital where I was born. Has actually been turned into a hotel. Yeah. But they gave me like a little walk around, and I could see where I was actually born. And, you know, going back there, that was the first time I'd been back there since we moved when I was 4.
Yeah, wow.
And it was just this really beautiful sense of coming home, and this relaxation, and so many things that you can do outside, and the snorkeling and the walking. There's beautiful rainforests and trails and things like that. So that I was like, wow, maybe that's why I love that stuff so much, because it was ingrained to me, you know, before I left. So, you know, we moved to Perth after that. And then, I've lived in all sorts of random places as well that people might. I've lived on Rottnest Island. I've lived in Broome. I've lived in Early Beach. I've also lived in America. So, yeah. But once I came to Brisbane, I was settled then. I was like, oh, yeah, this is my place.
Great. And happy to have you here in Brisbane.
Thanks.
Fantastic. Okay, a couple of closing questions. If you could recommend a book, movie, TV show, or podcast to listeners, what would it be and why?
Yeah, someone got me onto the audiobooks at actually a networking event, and they recommended a book for me, which was it was interesting, but that was not the one that I'm going to recommend.
Okay, let's skip that pass. Yep, that's fine. Yep.
I just listened to the Matthew Perry, The Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing.
Yep.
and he actually reads it. And so it's an autobiography, but he also actually spoke to it. And that was only a few months before he passed away. And, it shows you that you can overcome obstacles, and that, the way that he can say something so serious and still try and make it lighthearted. He pokes fun at himself because he knows that, a lot of the mistakes that were made in his life were his own fault.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yep.
so, but he was just a really nice person, and he showed that he could, get through, and he was very resilient, and he built really strong relationships, and he was just, it was very sad but very funny at the same time. And actually having the autobiographies read by the actual person, you really feel like you're connecting with them. With the new Dave Grohl one that he did, and I was like, wow, I feel like I know you. I feel like we're friends. So it was just, I find that the audio books for the autobiographies are really excellent.
Yeah,
But
great.
I also, love all different movies, and I'm always streaming something or restreaming something. So with books, I really love Stephen King and Dean Koontz. So I love me a bit of horror, and that was instilled from my mother at a young age, and I started reading through her books. So if you like Stephen King, The Stand is definitely his best book, I would say. It takes a very long time to read it.
Yes, it's a long one. Yes, I have done that a long time ago.
Yeah, and it's one of the only books I've reread multiple times, because it is that good, and it really makes you think. And then when COVID hit, I was like, wow, this is so much like The Stand. It was really weird. Yeah.
Did you feel that because I think there was 2 series of The Stand. The first one I think had Rob Lowe, and I think the second one had Whoopi Goldberg in it. Did either of them capture, in your view, the books? I know it never does. It never does fully, but was one of them closer than the other, do you think?
There is one closer than the other. It's still not obviously as good, but the movie. So the movie back in the 90s with Rob Lowe.
Yeah, the movie. Sorry, yes, it was a movie. Yeah,
that was excellent. And when I heard there was going to be a series, I was like so excited, because it's my favorite book, and I would have been so annoying to watch this with. I just kept going, no, that's not right. No, that makes no sense. No, they didn't explain that at all. Oh, the backstory to this is, my partner's like, can we just watch it? And I was like, oh, sorry. No, I couldn't. It just was too far off the mark for me. So, yeah. And I'm also just like a bit of a dork for recipe books.
Okay.
So anytime I see a new recipe book, I kind of get that. I love having them in front of me and sitting and trying new food and cooking, and, that's... So, I'm a bit of a nerd. I've got quite a few cookbooks.
So we talked about so many things today. And we talked about your journey. We talked about even talked about your philosophy and some of the challenges, some advice or guidance points that you give to people who are at the start of the journey and also at a similar level to you. You've also thanked Dave as well extensively throughout this podcast. Again, hi, Dave. Is there a quote or moment of inspiration you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, actually, this quote is from Bob Carter. The lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part.
Oof. Okay.
There are so many times in HR when people come to you in a flap, and this needs to be resolved in this second, and I'm like, okay, stop, let's just regroup, and because it's kind of hard. Sometimes you get kind of wrapped up in the urgency, and then you go, hang on a minute, I'm not going to give you the best answer if I rush it. And just because you didn't get me my stuff in time, and now, no, now you have to do it. And you go, well, hang on, no. I think everyone should have an internal service level agreement around reasonable timeframes to respond to people. So, it's very easy to get caught up in that and drop everything and, but if you look at it and go, this isn't really an emergency, that's okay. Thanks, leave it with me. I think I've got all the information. I'll let you know if I need anything else, and I'll get back to you, maybe by the end of today. If you just keep getting stuck with people bringing all this stuff to you that's urgent, but it's not really urgent, because they're a bit of a flap, you're not going to get your best results. you're not going to get anything finished for the day. You know, when you get to the end of the day and you go, oh, what have I ticked off my list? And you're like, okay, cool, one thing, you know. So it's really important to stay focused. And if people try to, you know, if they're disorganized and they try to bring you into that, to, you know, coach them to go, okay, well, this probably could have been done yesterday. Have you done this step and that step? No, 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 I just came to you first to tell you. That's okay. Well, how about you do these steps first, and then we'll work on a result. So, you know, I think that's important. I think you know, being accountable for your own role and not like impacting other people negatively. You know, I would never go to somebody and go, I need a result right now. You have to do that. You know, you just wouldn't do it. That's not a good way to be a good colleague, you know, or a good leader. So, you know, you need to make sure you're giving people a respectful amount of time to respond.
It's a great quote, and I think it sort of sums up a little bit about what you've talked about today. You know, your journey has been an unusual one, but you had leadership positions. You had, I mean, you talked about HR being one of the first times you actually sat down for a role. I mean, that was, you know, it's a huge difference to what you were doing. And then you talked about how, you know, really there was a person who took you under his wing and, you know, helped you, guided you to shadow and then eventually take on some responsibility, take on some of the HR load. And you've sort of moved from that to eventually a more senior role. And even from that senior position, you talk about that learning and development being very, very integral, very important. You actually want to pass that down. You are looking to pass that knowledge down and also train up essentially the next generation, whoever that might be. You also brought up this great point about networking and getting outside your comfort zone. It's not something that you are necessarily that comfortable with, but you know, you force yourself, and that sort of also played a bit into discussions earlier you had with people about brand and your brand. What's the brand you want to put out there, and almost leaning into that a bit more. There was also this that sort of comment about culture, which I'm sure there'll be two sides of HR that will have different views on, which I think is a really interesting point. And it was just so interesting to hear how you recounted that too. It was more like you told us a story, but it all made logical sense in terms of the way you were thinking, the way you do think, and you can definitely see why you are the way you are in terms of how you deal with human resources and why you're in that position, because I think all the stuff you've learned really has led to this. And yeah, it's great to have you on the HR Engage podcast, Hayley.
Thank you. That was fun.
Well, we've got another episode in the can with Hayley. Thank you for listening again. I'm Jonathan Mamaril with the HR Engage podcast. Make sure you subscribe if you like, and speak soon.